If I wanted to get lean and athletic for summer, this is exactly what I would do. Hey, what's going on? Eric Bach here with the Eric Bach Podcast. And as of this filming, summer just started officially yesterday. But if you're like me in South Carolina, it has been incredibly hot already for weeks on end. And I'll tell you what, I need to get an air conditioner in the garage for these workouts or I'm going to get heat stroke. Let's break down exactly what you need to do in order to get lean and athletic for summer. So the number one thing I would recommend to get started with is our 30-day Metabolic Reboot program. Here's exactly how this works. This is where people come directly into our coaching program and get incredible results, especially in the first 30 days. And so here's what we do. For 30 days, we do 16-8 intermittent fasting. Now, intermittent fasting, some people love it, some people hate it. Let me explain the rationale here. The primary reason that intermittent fasting works for fat loss is it can be a very sustainable method for many people to lose fat, especially if you are busy. And because it primarily controls for calories, that's the reason any diet works. It can flow with your lifestyle a little bit more effectively, especially in the summer when you have cookouts, when you have more social events. So we implement 16-8 intermittent fasting, and then your diet is primarily focused on lean protein and plants. So we're looking to minimize processed food, processed junk, like, protein supplements, stuff like that is okay. And that becomes our way of actually controlling calories. And so during the first 30 days, we actually don't have our clients track their calories directly through this process because we're focusing on the habits that create a calorie deficit versus meticulously tracking every single thing that you focus on. And so by extension, here's what we typically see with our clients with a 30-day metabolic reboot. First, improved body weight. Many times we'll see men lose 7 to 10 pounds within that first 30 days. Women, depending on their size, sometimes between 3 and 7. Some of that's water weight, most of it's body fat. Second, we see improved insulin sensitivity. A lot of our clients actually go through and get blood work. And so we can see what these biomarkers actually look like and improve carb tolerance. The reason this is important is we're going to want to increase carbohydrates after this initial phase, which we'll break into, because it's crucial for thyroid function. It helps you perform better. People run into a lot of issues when they take an aggressive short-term approach for a diet. They extend it for not just a month, but 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, and they deal with metabolic downregulation. We'll get into that component as well. But so what we want to do is we've got 30 days, 16-8 intermittent fasting. We focus on eating lean protein and plants as a primary focus. And by controlling these factors, we're going to be able to control for calories, decrease inflammation, improve insulin sensitivity, and of course, lose body fat without having to track your calories, which is a very nice component. Now, the second thing that we focus on is then what we call our cyclical shredding system. And so this is our personal take on carb cycling. So if you've never done carb cycling, here's how it works. Because when you train, you're going to burn through glucose, glycogen, muscle glycogen, so stored carbohydrates directly inside your muscles. What we want to do is we want to increase carbohydrates directly on the days that you're training. This is going to lead to more effective workouts. This can help lead to a potential recomposition effect depending on your training status, where you're building a little bit of muscle while getting leaner. And one thing that's really crucial to understand is you want to avoid being on prolonged low carb, low calorie diets, even when you're trying to get shredded. The longer and harder you diet with a phase like that, the more metabolic adaptations you have. So your metabolic rate slows down. You burn fewer calories during exercise. You actually instinctively start to move a little bit less. And so what happens is your metabolism slows down. You start to reach for a plateau. And so by increasing carbohydrates with a carb cycling approach, we can still keep carbohydrates a little bit lower and calories a little bit lower on your off days. But your training days, we want to provide your body with the fuel that it needs, not only to build lean muscle and perform better, but it also preserves your metabolic rate, gives kind of a baseline security blanket for your hormones, and it prevents you from getting stuck like so many people do. Now, what we need to think about here is you still want to be in a calorie deficit. And when you start to get to this phase, this is when you want to track calories. So a good baseline when it comes to tracking calories for fat loss, I like to use body weight in pounds times about 12. So for example, if you're a 200-pound person looking to get lean, this would put you about 2,400 calories, right? And so at this point, what are we doing? We want at least a gram protein per pound of body weight. Carbohydrates about 40%, and then the rest is going to be fat. We simply want to increase your carbohydrate intake to 50% of your calories on your training days, which means we have to drop the fat a little bit further, and then we pull it back on the off days. And so when you do this, again, this allows you to have more flexibility directly in your diet. Some people intermittent fast, some don't. Again, this is where the individualized component comes in. But because we have the increase in carbohydrates, we're going to be able to train better, build and retain as much lean muscle, and it protects your hormones from metabolic downregulation. Continue to get leaner. In addition, if you like to enjoy a good cookout, if you want to go and enjoy some tequila, whatever you're sipping on during the summer, by increasing and having that carb cycling approach, you can have a lot better lifestyle balance as well. And that's a crucial component, because the main reason that most people struggle to get lean, to get jacked, and to get athletic is a lack of consistency, a lack of sustainability with the approach that they are taking. Number 3, it could be number 1, but set realistic expectations on what you're going to do with this body fat. All right, so here's the reality. Almost everybody has more to lose than they think if they want to actually get shredded. For example, check out this picture right here. This is me when I am shredded. Currently, I still have abs. For me to go from abs to shredded, we're talking another 15 to 20 pounds, right? So that's a pretty big difference. And so I think a lot of people underestimate how much body fat they actually have to lose to get the look that they want. And this can be really tough. It can be tough on your ego. Like, I know for me, I was a small kid growing up. I was like the last to mature. And so like, I remember wanting to try to get my body weight as high as I could for football programs, because I didn't want to see like 145 or some like tiny ass weight on there, especially because I want to play ball in college, right? And so we have to understand there's going to be a mental component, but a lot of people have more weight to lose than they really think. And so like, let's talk about expectations and what they should actually be. Fast fat loss is going to be between 1 to 2 pounds of body fat in a week. 2 is very fast. 1 is a much better standard for most people. For women, it might be half a pound to even 7.75 pounds in a week. And so what we have to understand here is you have to give yourself a good runway when it comes to fat loss, because the more aggressively you try to lose fat, the more muscle you lose, the more metabolic adaptations you have, the more issues you're going to face when it comes to hormone levels, right? And so if we want to reverse engineer it, like let's say you want to lose 15 pounds, you're going to want to have at least like 12 to 15 weeks to lose that weight. And you think about it too, if you're 15 pounds overweight, if you're 30 pounds overweight, it didn't just happen in like 10 days or even like 10 weeks. It probably happened over the course of a year or two. And so comparatively speaking, if it took you a year to gain that 15 pounds you want to lose, like if it only takes you 12 to 16 weeks to lose it, like that's comparatively very fast progress. And I think a lot of people get a skewed expectation on what fast fat loss actually is based on all the shit they see on social media, which I get. Like it's really frustrating. And so the reality is we have to set ourselves up with a proper expectation. I would say set it up so you're losing about a pound per week. And so if you look at that, you give yourself a fine timeline to see, okay, it's probably going to take me this long to be able to lose that body fat. Then I'll be in a good spot. Again, taking a step further, most of us typically have a little bit more body fat to lose than we actually think to get the body that we want, which is frustrating. And so there's always going to be kind of an adjustment period when it comes to the expectations that you have and the reality with what you're actually seeing throughout that entire process. But here's the good news. One of the big concerns a lot of guys have is if I start to lose too much, then I'm going to look skinny. I'm going to look scrawny. What we have to understand is when you start to get shredded, when you really get down close to the single digit body fat, you get visible abs, sometimes your clothes aren't going to fit the same way that they did before. And you might actually feel like you look a little bit worse in your clothes, but you actually look bigger when it comes to like your shirt being off. Say if you have, bicep veins in your arms, all of these things. And so I always like to reference this quote from Vince Gironda. And it goes along the lines of, if you don't like what you see in the mirror, what difference does the number on a scale make? And so what I want you to think about is like, use the mirror as your ultimate judge in terms of progress, because that scale weight is going to fluctuate up and down a lot, especially on a daily and a weekly basis. And so if you start to go based on that component, you're going to feel a lot better about the progress that you are making. And also understand that the vast majority of guys end up looking bigger and more muscular as they get leaner, simply because they have deeper cuts. You can see more separation between your muscles. You have more vascularity. Again, like look at this picture right here. That compared to a picture of me right now, I probably look bigger in the picture where I'm lean and shredded, even though the difference is about 20 pounds. And so when we start to understand what realistic expectations are going to be, it allows us to set forth the actions that we need to make that a reality. And when we do that and we start to stack success, start to stack wins and doing the right things, that's when we can really build that long-term consistency, which will help you get strong, lean, and shredded, but also be able to maintain it for the long haul. Okay, number 4, time carbohydrates directly around your workouts. When it comes to carbohydrates specifically, there's so many people who love like the low carb stuff right now, which again, is kind of a trend. Like total calories and protein matter a lot more than just carbohydrates themselves. But when you're trying to get leaner, one thing I always recommend is timing more carbohydrates directly around your workout. One of the primary reasons here is improved insulin sensitivity directly around your workout. And so the analogy I like to make is your muscles are like a sponge, okay? And so if you have a sponge and you squeeze it and you put it in water, what does it do? It expands and it sucks up the water and whatever's in it. right? That's kind of how your muscles work. So if you think about it, your muscles are like a sponge. And then if you have carbohydrates flowing directly through your bloodstream, what do? They pull those carbohydrates directly in. They get stored as muscle glycogen, and that is fuel for better performance in your workouts. And so when you start to time your carbohydrates directly around your workouts, one, the carbohydrates that you're having are going to be used primarily to fuel the performance of that direct workout. It's also going to reduce cortisol, your body's primary stress hormone. And so when we can reduce cortisol, specifically at the end of a workout with, say, a post-workout shake of highly branched cyclic dextrin or a piece of fruit and a protein shake, that's going to help overall in terms of exercise recovery, muscle repair, and just kind of jumpstart that entire process. We have to understand that inherently, if we're trying to lose body fat, we're at a deficit. So our body doesn't have the excess calories that it always needs to be able to build adequate amounts of tissue. So if we want to get more refined in terms of our targeting with carbohydrates, this allows us to recover from that exercise more effectively, even while maintaining a calorie deficit. Number 5, keep your protein intake about 1 gram per 1 pound of body weight, if not a little bit more. Now, there's a lot of research in regards to how much protein you should have in order to lose fat and build muscle. In fact, I would recommend checking out this video that we did that broke down how much protein intake you really need, or our protein article, which you can see directly in the description box below. And so what do we need to focus on here? So the sweet spot when it comes to protein, this is if you're natural, not if you're, shooting up all the gear and having fun with all that stuff, would be about 1 gram per pound of body weight. And the reason we want to be around this number, that's what's going to help us retain as much lean muscle as we can. When we are cutting down, we're getting shredded, steeper the calorie deficit, the more likely we are to lose lean muscle. And when that happens, or when we're in that calorie deficit, we are also breaking down lean muscle tissue as well, especially if we're on a low carbohydrate diet, because carbohydrates are protein sparing. When we get that 1 gram per pound of body weight, what does that help us do? One, it helps us retain as much lean muscle as we can. The more muscle we retain when we're getting shredded, well, guess what? That means a higher metabolic rate. We're less likely to hit a plateau. Next, we're also going to look a lot better when we keep that muscle. We want to lose body fat. We don't want to lose muscle, so we really need to emphasize how much protein we are getting. Number 3, it's going to keep hunger at bay. Protein is the most satiating macronutrient. You're going to be a lot more full consuming a primarily made of protein than you are a bag of potato chips, even if the calories are the same. So double up on the protein. And finally, there's a high thermic effect of protein. 30% of the calories that you consume directly from protein are burned up during digestion. So that can aid overall in fat loss and actually help you eat a little bit more, keeping you satiated, keeping you on track, keeping you in that calorie deficit without wanting to gnaw your arm off or binging on whatever is in the pantry. Protein intake, 1 gram per pound of body weight, sometimes even a little bit more, is going to help you out. Strategy number 6, train more often. I would say 4 to 6 days a week if you can. Now, here's a caveat. When you are training, and you're in a calorie deficit, your body does not have as much fuel to recover from each individual workout. And so what we want to do is we have to walk this line. See, the more we train our body during fat loss, the more we're signaling to our body that we need to retain the muscle tissue that we have. Otherwise, if you're in a calorie deficit, your body's saying, I don't want to lug around this body fat or this muscle. Let's break some of it off and let's burn it up. And there it goes. There goes your hard-earned biceps, right? And so if we can train more often, we can send that signal. We can increase muscle protein synthesis and say, hey, we need to keep this muscle. We need to be able to keep this muscle so we can overcome the stress that I'm putting in underneath throughout this entire process. The key here is we actually have to train with a lower training volume within each workout, and we need to train more intensely. This runs contrary to most advice that you see that's out there, but let me explain why. Higher volume with your workouts is generally going to lead to more cravings. In addition, higher volume with your workouts is going to your body's going to thrive actually in a higher carbohydrate environment to help restore the carbohydrates that you're burning, right? When that volume goes up, our demand generally for carbohydrates goes up. And so conversely, we want to lower the volume within each workout because it's going to help match the recovery that we are not going to have dialed in as much when we're trying to get shredded. And we want to train close to muscular failure, meaning we have 1 or 2 reps in reserve. 1 or 2 reps in reserves mean if I've got a gun to your head and you're doing a set of squats, you can only do 1 or 2 more reps with that weight before your muscles fail, your technique goes out the window. So we have to take a different approach. It's not high reps, trying to burn as many calories as you can. It needs to be lower volume within each workout and training harder, but with a shorter overall aspect. And again, training more is going to help increase muscle protein synthesis, which maintains your lean muscle mass. It's going to increase some of the natural anabolic pulses that happen as a result of our training, testosterone, stuff like that. And it's going to keep you focused. In addition, when we train more often, we're going to have more increases in terms of insulin sensitivity. If you remember my previous tip, your muscles work like a sponge, right? And so if we are having that sponge-like effect where our muscles are capable of taking the glucose, the carbohydrate carbohydrates that are in our system and store them directly as glycogen, well, guess what? That's going to help improve insulin sensitivity, burn a few more calories, and frankly, help you get leaner and look better. So how do you typically set this up? I would set it up like Monday would be a push day, upper body focus. Lower body day would be Tuesday, maybe a posterior chain or hamstring focus. Wednesday could be an off day or cardio. Thursday would be a pull day, upper body. So rows, chin-ups, all the like. Friday would be a push day, upper body focus again. Next, we'd have Saturday. That'd be an off day or cardio. And then finally, we could have a lower body focus on a Saturday/Sunday. We're hitting everything again in that regard. That way we're hitting upper body, 3 days per week. Then we're hitting lower body twice per week. That's a really simple cadence for a lot of people to follow. Building on a previous tip, number 7, we need to lower intra-workout training volume. I like to get most people in and out in about 45 minutes, warm up notwithstanding. So the greater the calorie deficit, the less volume your body can actually recover from. And so if you take that workout volume that you're doing and you work out even harder, even longer, it's also going to drive up cortisol. It's going to drive up cravings. It's going to drive up hunger. And so if you end up working out longer and harder, trying to burn calories, but then you get more cravings and you can easily eat those calories back, you're defeating the purpose of what your training is actually focused on. The primary role of your training when you're trying to get shredded is to retain as much lean muscle as you can. Burning additional calories is more of an ancillary benefit, not the primary goal. And so when training volume is too high, we start to see decreases in hormones like IGF-1, insulin. We see decreases sometimes in testosterone, while increasing catabolic hormones like cortisol. When we have this kind of cascade here, the key concept to understand is training more or training longer won't always help you. What we should focus on is training shorter, training frequently, and training intense. In addition, if we train too hard and too long, your immune system is going to be compromised. When your immune system is compromised, obviously that can lead to issues with recovering from exercise, but also getting sick. And tell you what, how fun is it to diet when you are already sick? It's not. So work on getting in and out of the gym in 45 to 60 minutes. Be intense with your training and follow a lower volume but intense approach. Number 8, we need a higher training intensity. You got to be able to push your sets close to muscular failure. The reason is this sends a signal to your body saying, hey, we need our muscles to be able to do this job, even in this low calorie environment. And therefore your muscles are going to say, hey, you know what? Cool. Let's keep this tissue. That's going to be very important. And so what we want to do is what we want to focus on is training close to failure. I like to use what we call reps in reserve. So for example, 1 rep in reserve means if there's a gun in my head, I can still do 1 rep with this with perfect weight. 1 to 2 reps in reserve is like I can probably do 1 or 2. 3 to 4, I can probably do 3 to 4. What I find with a lot of people is they do not actually train hard enough to really maximize either the muscle building effect or the training effect. Sure, they train hard in terms of intensity of like having short rest periods, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about taking your work sets in the gym when you're lifting weights close to failure, but doing so with great technique. And so what we want to be able to focus on is 1 to 2 reps reserve, really train what we call maximum effective reps. And so maximum effective reps are where your rep speed is actually slowing down. So think about doing a bench press here. You're doing a bench press and you kind of get to those last couple of reps and that, you're controlling that eccentric and you try to push up and it starts to grind just a little bit. This is what we actually need to recruit all the muscle fibers that we do have. And if we're not challenging our body to that extent where our rep speed is actually slowing down, you might actually lose some lean tissue when it comes to being in a calorie deficit and your training. So again, the key thing we have to focus on here is training shorter in terms of your volume, in terms of your duration, but keeping that intensity high so we send the right signal directly to your body. Number 9, use the double progression training model. So double progression basically means you train within a rep range and first you increase your reps within that rep range and then you increase the weight. So let's say you have a dumbbell bench press and it says 3 sets of 6 to 8. You would want to start doing those sets with a weight where you're failing around 6 on the bottom of that rep range. What you want to do is you want to keep that weight the same until you get to 7, all the way up to 8 reps. And so let's say you do 60 pounds times 6, cool. And then the following week you get 60 times 8, perfect. So the following week, what we would do, because we're working within that same 6 to 8 rep range, is then we increase that weight 5 to 10 pounds. Now we're at 65 times 6, and maybe you get 7. And we just keep going that way. And so first thing that we do is we find the weight that we're kind of failing around the bottom end of that rep range. Then we train with that weight until we get to the top end of that rep range. Once we hit the top, then we increase the weight and go to the bottom rep range. And so instead of consistently changing the workouts that you're doing and always changing the exercises, you don't need to confuse your muscles. That is such a complete bullshit myth. Instead, focus on a proven double progression training program that's going to help you challenge your muscles to have that progressive overload stimulus that they need to grow and or to retain that lean muscle. Ooh, gang, tell you what, my pre-workout is starting to kick in. I do not use a caffeinated pre-workout, by the way. I use Pulse by Legion. I like a stim-free because I'm drinking coffee multiple times throughout the day. And so if you want to use a great pre-workout that's going to help give you performance increases, but not give you excessive jitters, or if you're training in the afternoon and you don't want to be wired and can't sleep at night, check out Pulse by Legion. Use the code BACH at checkout. You can actually save 20% on your first order. Go check them out. I like the strawberry kiwi. I've got the fruit punch right here. Not quite as good, but still pretty bomb. Tip number 10, synergistic conditioning. What the hell does synergistic conditioning mean? Here's what we need to understand. Our body needs to be in synergy, right? Like if we're in a low carbohydrate type diet, our ability to train with a very high intensity with high volume is going to be compromised. And so when we see all these diets right now, they're like ketogenic based and low carb focused, and then you add in high intensity exercise, high intensity intervals, high intensity, running, whatever it is, like people run into a lot of issues. And the reason is, if we are not giving our body the fuel source that it needs to perform adequately with an exercise, it creates a more stressed out environment. We increase our body's primary stress hormone, cortisol. What do we know about cortisol? When cortisol increases, insulin sensitivity, how well your body handles carbohydrates, goes down. Your thyroid function, which is the master controller of your metabolic function and metabolic rate, it goes down. Oh, and your cravings go up. And so when you have cravings and a worse metabolic rate and decreased insulin sensitivity, is that really going to help you lose fat, get shredded? Probably not. And so what we need to think about is if you're in a steep calorie deficit, especially lower in carbohydrates, the idea of trying to push your cardio, to red line intensity work in like zone 4, zone 5, heaving and hawing like Seabiscuit running down the racetrack, it is going to probably slow down your fat loss more than it's going to help. And so what I like to do is actually break down my conditioning into tiers. So number 1, hit 8 to 10,000 steps per day. Like if you're at 8,000 right now, I want you to get to 10. That's your baseline for cardio. Next, I like to start adding some intervals, but I like to keep them a little bit shorter in terms of the duration that we're doing. And so I've got an assault bike. I love to use that thing. It's a 5-minute warm up. And then we'll go 10 sets of 10 seconds all out, 50 seconds recovery twice per week. Tier 2, I like to add zone 2 cardio. So zone 2 cardio is just enough where if you are talking to somebody else that you are actually still able to have a conversation, right? Like if we get to the point where my voice is broken up between a conversation like that, we know we're starting to crack into like zone 3, zone 4 cardio, which is technically high intensity. So your cardio should be not so intense that you cannot hold a conversation with somebody. The way to find this would be take 220 minus your age times like 0.5, 0.6, like that'll get you in the ballpark. For me at 35 years old, I'm around 130 to 145 will put me right in that zone 2 category. So those would be the tiers that I would focus on. First, hit your steps. Second, add in some intervals twice per week. If we need to back that off a little bit, then we can look at doing some zone 2 cardio a couple days a week as well. I like to do about 30 minutes there. It's a little bit less impact on your body. The biggest takeaway here is as your calories and carbohydrates get lower, the intensity of your cardio should probably drop a little bit as well. Otherwise, you're going to have a little bit more stress. You're going to increase cravings and you're not giving your body the fuel that it needs. And your weight training, which is going to be exponentially more important when it comes to retaining muscle and metabolic rate, is probably going to suffer as well. Number 11, I like to mix in heavy and explosive training. And let me explain. This could be as simple as adding things in like box jumps. It could be even lifting with lower rep ranges, 3 to 5 reps. And so this does a couple things. When we train heavy, when we train explosively, we actually activate more fast twitch muscle fibers, type 2 muscle fibers. These are the ones that are most important for being athletic, for being powerful, for generating speed. And because we're talking about not just getting lean here, we're talking about getting athletic, this is important. And so adding training where we have these factors tied in, it's going to activate fast twitch muscle fibers, which directly can help improve that athleticism and power and speed. And it's going to signal to your body that we need to keep them. In addition, when we have more heavy, explosive, athletic type training, when we improve muscle fiber recruitment, it allows us to fatigue and train more muscle fibers later on. Think of it this way. If you just go into a workout, there's never anything explosive, you never do anything speed-based, whatever. Say you're recruiting 60% of your chest. Cool. Well, if you're recruiting 60% of the muscle fibers in your chest, and then you're doing more high volume work on the back end, you're trying to get a good pump, pump, you're trying to do a finish or whatever it is, you can only fatigue 60% of those. But what if we do an exercise that fires up your central nervous system, that improves muscle fiber recruitment, and now you're able to recruit 75? If we can recruit and we can train and fatigue 75% of our muscle fibers, that could be a bigger training effect than that 60, right? And so this can be very simple. It could be as simple as on your lower body days, adding 3 sets of 5 box jumps. On your upper body days, it could be adding 3 sets of 5 medicine ball slams or a plyometric push-up. It doesn't have to be crazy. It doesn't have to be, some crazy athletic training circuit. It can be as simple as doing your warm-up and then doing an explosive exercise. In addition, when we train heavy, when we train explosive, we actually improve what's called myogenic tone. This is the tone of your muscles at rest. And so when you improve your myogenic tone and you get lean, that's when your muscles really get that dense, hard, lean, athletic look. Think of a sprinter. Of course, a sprinter has low body fat, but it still illustrates the point. Whereas a lot of people just do a bunch of high rep stuff, trying to pump and burn. That's going to improve what we call metabolic stress, aka the pump, or that's going to trigger metabolic stress, aka the pump, which typically leads to more glycogen storage, more of a pumped up type appearance. So if we want to be able to be strong, lean, and athletic, we want to make sure that we include some heavy, explosive type training directly in, because it's going to make our training more effective, but we can also improve myogenic tone. Number 12, increase your sodium intake, especially as we're talking about summer. Sipping on electrolytes, absolutely crucial across the board. A lot of people look at taking sodium away in their diet thinking that, oh my gosh, that's going to increase water retention. Our body doesn't necessarily work like that. When we start to decrease things like sodium, our body naturally starts to retain more water. And when it comes to your training, if we don't have good quality sodium intake in, it actually limits our ability to get high quality muscular contractions directly in your training. You're going to feel more fatigued and you're going to feel foggy. In addition, especially if you're low carbohydrate in terms of a diet, using an electrolyte supplement will dramatically improve your performance. A lot of times when people think, hey, I need to adjust my sodium intake and take it down because I'm holding more water, the reality is they should actually increase their water intake and increase their sodium intake. It's going to lead to better overall quality training, better energy levels, and your body is going to still get rid of the excess water weight when you're showing your body that it doesn't need to hold on to it. Again, think of it this way. If you're not having a ton of water, and if you're not giving your body sodium, yet those things are vital for your body, what's it going to do? It's going to hold on to as much of it as you can. So if we want to be able to improve the way that we look, feel, and perform, make sure that that sodium intake is dialed in. The sweet spot for intake right there is going to be 2,000 to 4,000 milligrams per day. Personally, I just salt all my food, and then I'll take an electrolyte supplement directly around my training, especially right now when it's 95 degrees with about 80% humidity, right? Not fun, but effective. Number 13, lucky number 13, optimizing your sleep. So anyone who's ever been deep in a cut, harder you diet, the more sleep disruptions you will experience. And when sleep disruptions happen, it's going to decrease anabolic hormone levels. It's going to decrease insulin sensitivity. It's going to increase inflammation. It's going to decrease mood. You're going to run into a lot of issues. And so one of the primary things we want to focus on is if we want to make the nutrition that we're focusing on, if we want to make our training that we're working hard at that much more effective, dialing in your sleep is going to be the most important thing. And if you're struggling with those like stubborn body fat areas, like that annoying lower belly fat, sleep and stress reduction is going to be the thing that helps you get over that edge. So here are a few tips to help you optimize your sleep. Number 1, work out earlier in the day. Ideally, if you can do it first thing in the morning, that's going to be great. It's going to get that workout in. You're going to stack some wins, and it's going to help with your overall circadian rhythm. If you work out later in the day, your body temperature tends to stay elevated for later, which actually suppresses the release of melatonin in your brain, which is going to prevent you from getting sleepy. So work out earlier in the day. Next, take 400 to 500 milligrams of magnesium at night. You can experiment with higher amounts, but magnesium is going to help your body relax. It's going to decrease stress. It can improve insulin sensitivity. The only downside is if you take too much magnesium, you are going to have the runs, and I do not want you to shit your pants during that early morning workout. Number 3, 200 milligrams of taurine after a hard workout. Taurine can actually decrease some of the central nervous system stress and the overactivity that happens, especially if you're on stimulants, especially if you are training very hard. So taking 200 milligrams of taurine after a workout can be helpful. In the afternoon, take 200 milligrams of L-theanine. L-theanine is a great supplement, both for improving flow state, but also kind of buffering some of the downsides of caffeine crashes. And so typically when people are cutting, they're going to be on more stimulants, trying to have a little bit more energy because sleep quality goes down and they don't have enough food. And so I find that having 200 milligrams of theanine in the afternoon is really beneficial, both for cognitive performance, also just the way that I look, feel, and perform, and am able to relax and frankly be a good dad and handle stuff at work. So definitely check out L-theanine in the afternoon. Then finally, try to avoid bright lights and screens later in the day. I know we're all on our phone, we're doom scrolling on whatever social media platform, watching Netflix. I do it too. If you can, get some glasses that have a blue light filter, turn down the brightness directly on your TV. To understand that those blue lights are going to suppress the natural release of melatonin. If you watch shows that get you too hyped up and excited, like me when I'm watching Billions or Ozarks or reruns of Breaking Bad, if that prevents you from actually being tired, that's going to negatively impact your ability to sleep, which is therefore going to negatively impact your ability to lose body fat. What we have to understand is like just losing body fat is a little bit different animal than getting athletic and getting shredded, right? But these same tips will apply even if you're just looking to drop a couple pounds. We need to understand that the leaner that we get, the harder fat loss becomes, and all of these details start to matter that much more. And so the big consideration many people need to make is how important is it to them to get lean? How is it going to improve their life? Because when you're going through the process of getting lean, especially getting shredded, there are going to have to be sacrifices in different areas. And so if your expectations on what you're going to look like and the sacrifices it's going to take are out of alignment with what you're willing to do, that can lead you to feel like a failure. So I always recommend before you decide that, hey, I'm going to get shredded, I'm going to get cut, do an inventory. How will this improve my life? When am I going to finish the cut? Because we need to have an end date for that goal. And then how is that going to improve? What am I willing to sacrifice? When you go through and ask these consistent questions, then you start to have a really good kind of background and database and understanding in your head what it's going to take. And when your expectations become in alignment with your reality and the things that you're going to experience, the chance of you not only getting results, but being able to maintain a great body are going to go through the roof. All right. So if you found value directly from this episode, please do me a favor. Share it on your favorite social media platform. Drop me a 5-star review and leave us a comment. That's all I've got. Hope you're having a great day. Enjoy the first couple of days of summer, and I'll catch you on the next one.
Hey, it's Eric here again. Now, there are 3 ways that I can help you look great naked. Number 1, if you want to grab a free copy of the Look Great Naked protocol to help you lose body fat without counting calories, then go to bachperformance.com/free training. Number 2, if you're a busy guy looking to build muscle, then I recommend checking out our Minimalist Muscle Blitz, which has helped over 1,000 men build muscle without living in the gym. Just go to minimalistmuscleblitz.com. The link will also be available in the show notes. Or number 3 and last, if you want to work with me directly and get the best results possible, apply at bachperformance.com/coaching to look great naked without living in the gym. Until next time, my friend,